Hello gainers, I'm Ralphie and welcome to another episode of Fitter Philosophy, the YouTube channel that combines a good dose of practical fitness into the philosophy, mainly based on Stoic principles, keeping it practical, keeping it rational, keeping it reasonable and not being too academic about it. And my subject today that I want to talk about is our senses. And in my experience, we don't use our senses enough. And I want to give you some fundamental reasons why, first of all, you should examine how you're using your senses, and then should practice using them a little bit more carefully. Spend a bit more time investing in tuning your senses. And then finally, the benefits of investing in having a greater awareness. First of all, let's define what senses are. What do I mean by that? I mean smell, taste, sound, sight, and touch. I knew there was another one. These are our 5 basic senses, although I think it's quite reasonable and rational to add the 6th sense, because it certainly does exist, and it's not just in folklore and fairy tales and alternative cultures. The 6th sense is certainly something that we have, but it's probably our most inactive and most suppressed sense. And there's a reason for that, but I'll cover that in another video at another date. Let's focus on the 5 primary, we'll call them the primary senses. And throughout our lives, it's what helps us connect from the person within, from the living entity that is within side of us, to the outside world. We want to hear, we want to see, we want to touch, we want to taste, and we want to smell. And with these facilities, cross-referencing them and using them, we can get through life, and often we can have a better experience simply because using our senses provides its own reward. I mean, what would chocolate be like if you couldn't taste it? What would a rainbow look like if you couldn't see it? You know, these are important things that add to our quality of life. Chocolate and rainbows. And a number of other things. Alcohol, another good example. But we tend to be quite passive as we use our senses. We take them for granted because they're a constant companion, and therefore we don't examine or think about them too much. We just assume that they will function tomorrow in the same way as they have yesterday and the year before. And it's only when we encounter someone who has a sensory impairment, for example, someone who is profoundly deaf, for example, and you may notice that they have a tremendous tactile sensory perception about them. In other words, they spend more time touching things and feeling the texture of things like stone, for example, which we never even think about. You know, stone is stone, it's hard, and that's it. But in fact, there are so many varieties of stone, and they all have different textures. And we don't know until we stop and start to more practically examine them. Also, someone who's profoundly deaf can have a tremendously heightened awareness of art. They can visit a gallery and they will see things in paintings, the colours, the nuances, the subtleties, the messages, the form and the composition that you and I, as we look at the superficial beauty of it, we fail to comprehend because we simply haven't used our senses enough. This is why artists and musicians and sculptors and cooks and people who create things that are sensory specific tend to have a greater connection with life, and they tend often to be good company when you're socialising, although they do always seem to have a certain weakness for some vice or other, whether it be cigarettes, alcohol, or, you know, more intense narcotics. But I'm going to give you some useful tips on how to heighten your senses. And let's start with the sense of touch. I'm sitting on a wall. It's a concrete wall, there's stone involved, and it's rough rendered at the top. And when I touch it, I can immediately tell it's a little bit rough, but there's a smoothness to it because it's been weathered. I can also tell that it's warm because the sun is shining, so it's giving a certain specific texture. And the more time I spend running my fingers over the surface, the more I can feel the variation in that texture, the more I start to fine-tune my connection and contact with my sense of touch, simply because I'm using it and thinking about it. It's the same with smell. If you happen to be a whiskey drinker like I am, quite by default, because it's so enjoyable and we're doing it all the time, we smell more and we take more time to smell more. And I can assure you that if you're keen on smelling whiskey and food and other wonderful things, you will walk into a garden and you will smell more of the herbaceous vegetation, the individuality and singularity of flowers. You will have a fine-tuning to your sense of smell that many people who use the senses passively do not have. It's like the sense of sight. It's another great one. Sense of sight is when we go to a gallery and we're looking at some works of art hanging up in the wall, and some of them may be rubbish, but others aren't. They're very good, and part of the skill is forgetting the monetary value of them and analysing and defining what that piece of work, or work of art, means to you on your own terms and your own points of reference. And when you look at the paintings, when you look at the pictures, you start to see, yes, there's blue and green and yellow and red in it, but then there's more. There's more subtlety, there's more graduation between colours, there's more softer, exotic colours. Colours that we see in the natural world only when we know what we're looking at. Because even when we look around us, we see the primary blue of the sky, the primary grey, bluish green tint of the sea, and maybe the grey of the wall, but when you look closer, there's so many colours making up that colour that we just haven't noticed. And the sense of taste, to taste a properly fresh cooked meal, that is when you really understand how banal, bland and superficial and shorthand so many pre-prepared frozen meals out of a supermarket can be, where the flavour is stripped and replaced with sugar and refined carbohydrates because they're the most addictive and they sell the best. So you can look at a chocolate dessert in a supermarket and it's brown coloured and there's a vague flavour of very forgettable chocolate. And the reason there's not a lot of chocolate in it is because it costs money to put the ingredients in to make the flavour, and therefore the producers don't. So that when you make your own using real chocolate, you get that far greater sense of profound satisfaction because you've engaged your senses much more dramatically, dynamically and successfully. What is there? What else is there? Touch, taste, sound, listening to music. We can all hear music in the radio. That's the easy bit. But it's when we put the headphones on and listen in deeper, more concentrated, more engagingly. That's when we can hear the real sounds that music is capable of expressing, and then we take it out into the world around us and then we hear it in the wind sighing through the trees, or birds flying overhead and calling out in the glittering sunshine of the end of summer days. And when we gauge all our senses, our 5 senses, I think I've covered them all now: touch, taste, sound, smell, and touch, taste, sound, smell, and something. Oh, I've forgotten. Will you help me out? Leave it in the comments, would you? I've forgotten one. Thank you. But when we engage all our senses, we don't have to do it dramatically. But we will notice in a fairly short space of time that to take that a little bit more time to connect with our senses individually, we start to become more fine-tuned. We hear more, we see more, we sense more. And in our senses, we can become more sensible. we have more sensibility, we experience more sensations, and we have more sense in our lives. And it's a wonderful thing. I urge you to practice it, and it's not difficult. Whether it be with a glass of whiskey or a fresh cooked meal, a walk in the countryside or a visit to an art gallery, all in all, it's no chore and it's no hardship to increase our sense, to improve our sense, and to improve our life along with it. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I am now going to help you with your sense, your visual sense, by leaving you for a few seconds to enjoy this dramatic, sun-drenched, blue sky overhead, beautiful view of the Irish Sea. Thank you for watching, gainers. Click subscribe, likey, bell, clicky, whatever, when you know the script, and we'll see you again shortly. Thanks for watching now. I'm Ralphie, over and out. Not so bad. Doing some recording.
Oh yeah.
The channel's called Fitter Philosophy. We're going to see the view.
Yeah.
Beautiful day. It's the end of summer, mate.
Yeah, I know.
Got to make the most of it.
When were it?
When was it? I think May, for about 4 weeks when the pandemic started. We got loads of summer then.
Typical, isn't it?
It's me recorded. I'll post up today and hopefully maybe get 1,000 views on it.